Oh, it is you again. Come closer, my dear. Look at the snow dancing behind the window. It's a cold night, isn't it? But here, by the fire, we are safe and warm. Pull the blanket up to your chin. There. Tonight I will tell you a story that is as old as the castle walls themselves. It's a story about a wish, a drop of blood, and a sleep so deep that even the wind forgot to blow. Listen closely. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far beyond the misty mountains lived a king and queen who lamented every day, saying, "Oh, if only we had a child." But for many years, their wish remained unfulfilled. One afternoon, as the queen was bathing in a crystal-clear pond, a frog crept out of the water onto the bank and said to her, "Your wish shall be fulfilled. Before a year has passed, you shall bring a daughter into the world." And just as the frog had foretold, a girl was born. She was so beautiful that the king could not contain his joy. He ordained a great feast. He invited not only his relations, friends and neighbors, but also the wise women, so that they might be kind and favorable to the child. Now there were 13 wise women in his kingdom, but because he had only 12 golden plates for them to eat from, one of them had to be left at home. The feast was held with all imaginable splendor. When it came to an end, the wise women bestowed their magic gifts upon the baby. One gave virtue, another beauty, a third riches, and so on, until she had everything in the world that one could wish for. When 11 of them had made their promises, the 13th suddenly entered. She wished to avenge herself for not having been invited. Without greeting or looking at anyone, she cried with a loud voice, "The king's daughter shall, in her 15th year, prick herself with a spindle and fall down dead." And without saying another word, she turned round and left the hall. Everyone was terrified. Then the 12th wise woman, whose wish was still unspoken, stepped forward. She could not undo the evil spell, but she could soften it. So she said, "It shall not be death, but a deep sleep of 100 years, into which the princess shall fall." The king, anxious to preserve his child from this misfortune, gave orders that every spindle in the whole kingdom should be burnt. As the years passed, the gifts of the wise women were fulfilled. The princess grew so beautiful, modest and kind that everyone who saw her could not help but love her. It happened that on the very day when she was 15 years old, the king and queen were away from home, and the princess was left quite alone in the castle. She wandered through every nook and corner, explored rooms and bedchambers, until at last she came to an old tower. She climbed the narrow winding staircase and reached a little door. In the lock was a rusty key, and when she turned it, the door sprang open. There, in a little room, sat an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning her flax. "Good day, old mother," said the king's daughter. "What are you doing there?" "I am spinning," said the old woman, nodding her head. "What is the thing that rattles round so merrily?" asked the girl. She took the spindle and wanted to spin too, but scarcely had she touched it when the magic spell was fulfilled and she pricked her finger with it. In the very moment she felt the prick, she fell down upon the bed that stood there and lay in a deep sleep. And this sleep fell upon the whole castle. The king and queen, who had just come home, fell asleep in the hall. The horses in the stable, the dogs in the yard, the pigeons on the roof, the flies on the wall. Even the fire that was flickering on the hearth became still and slept. The meat stopped sizzling, and the cook, who was about to scold the kitchen boy, let him go and went to sleep. The wind sank, and on the trees before the castle, not a leaf stirred. Round about the castle, a hedge of briar roses began to grow. Every year it grew higher, until at last it surrounded the whole castle and grew above it so that nothing could be seen, not even the flag upon the roof. 100 years had now passed. The story of the beautiful sleeping briar rose was told throughout the country. From time to time, princes came and tried to force their way through the hedge, but it was impossible. The thorns held together as if they had hands, and the young men were caught in them and died a pitiful death. After many, many years, another king's son came to that country. He heard an old man talking about the hedge of thorns. The old man said that there was a castle behind it, and in this castle, a wonderfully beautiful princess had been asleep for 100 years. The young prince said, "I am not afraid. I will go and see the beautiful briar rose." But now the 100 years were just ended. The day had come when Briar Rose was to awake. When the prince drew near the hedge, it was no longer thorns, but large, beautiful flowers. They opened of their own accord and let him pass unhurt. Behind him, they closed again into a wall. In the castle yard, he saw the horses and the spotted dogs lying asleep. On the roof sat the pigeons with their heads under their wings. As he entered the house, the flies were asleep upon the wall. The cook in the kitchen was still holding out his hand to seize the boy. The prince went on farther. All was so quiet that he could hear his own breathing. At last, he reached the old tower and opened the door of the little room where Briar Rose was sleeping. There she lay, looking so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off her. He bent down and gave her a kiss. As soon as he kissed her, Briar Rose opened her eyes and looked at him quite sweetly. Then they went down together. The king and queen awoke, and the whole court, and they looked at each other with great astonishment. The horses in the yard got up and shook themselves. The dogs jumped up and wagged their tails, and the pigeons on the roof pulled their heads from under their wings and flew into the open country. The flies on the wall crept again. The fire in the kitchen burned up and cooked the meat. The cook gave the boy such a box on the ear that he roared, and the maid finished plucking the fowl. And then the marriage of the prince and Briar Rose was celebrated with all splendor, and they lived happily until the end of their days. And so the thorns turned into roses and the silence turned into laughter. Just as it always does, my dear, when love finds its way home. But look at you. Your eyes are getting heavy. The fire is burning low, and it's time for your own sweet dreams. Sleep now, my little one. Good night. Lights out.